Clara Voss woke up on a Tuesday morning in September to find that her husband had taken the horse, the wagon, $47 from the jar under the floorboards, and whatever dreams she had been foolish enough to carry with her from Ohio. He had left behind the soddy, the cook stove, a winter's worth of work to be done, and a note that said only, "I'm sorry, this isn't the life I wanted." She read the note 3 times, then burned it in the stove. She didn't cry. Crying was for people who had time and energy to spare, and Clara had neither. She was 19 years old, alone on a quarter section of Nebraska sand hills, and winter was 8 weeks away. The nearest neighbor was August Lindqvist, a Swedish bachelor who had been farming these hills since 1871. He showed up 3 days after Marcus left, having heard the news from the mail carrier who heard it from the store clerk who heard it from God knows where. News traveled fast on the prairie, even when there was nothing but grass to carry it. "The husband is gone," August said, standing in her doorway with his hat in his hands. It wasn't a question. "Yes." "You are staying?" Clara looked at him. She had spent 3 days inventorying what she had. The soddy, which was solid enough, the cook stove, which worked, a milk cow, 6 chickens, a small store of flour and salt and beans. No horse, no wagon, no way to leave even if she wanted to. No money to start over somewhere else. No family to return to in Ohio. Her parents had died of cholera when she was 15. And she had married Marcus at 17 because it seemed better than starving. "I don't have anywhere else to go," she said. August nodded slowly, his weathered face giving nothing away. "Then you will need to prepare. The winter here is not like Ohio. The wind comes straight from the pole, and there is nothing between you and Canada but grass. I know how to prepare for winter. You know how to prepare for Ohio winter." He looked at her soddy, at the walls of packed earth and grass, at the single window and the door that faced north because Marcus hadn't known any better. "This house will not keep you warm. The walls are too thin and the door faces the wrong direction. By January, you will be burning everything you own just to stay alive." Clara felt the first cold finger of real fear touch her spine. "What do I do?" August was quiet for a long moment, his pale eyes scanning the horizon as if reading something written in the grass. "There is a thing we did in Sweden when I was young. We stacked hay against the walls of the house before the snow came. The hay holds dead air, and dead air does not conduct heat. A house wrapped in hay loses its warmth slowly, like a body wrapped in blankets." "How much hay?" "As much as you can stack. 2 feet thick, 3 feet, as high as you can reach. It will look ugly. People will laugh. But you will be warm when they are burning their furniture." Mrs. Ida Fenton was the first to laugh. She rode out to Clara's claim in early October when the hay banking was half finished. Clara had spent 3 weeks cutting prairie grass with a scythe she had traded 2 chickens for, bundling it into rough bales, stacking them against the walls of the soddy until the little house looked like it was being swallowed by a yellow-brown monster. Mrs. Fenton sat on her horse and stared at the spectacle with an expression that mixed disgust with satisfaction. The look of someone who has found exactly the evidence they were looking for. "Mrs. Voss," she said, using the title like a weapon, "what on earth are you doing to that house?" Clara didn't stop working. She was tying another bundle of grass, her hands raw from the rough stems, her back aching from bending. "Banking it for winter. It looks like a haystack had a child with a mud hut. You can't seriously intend to live in that thing." "I seriously intend to survive the winter, Mrs. Fenton. What it looks like while I'm doing it isn't my primary concern." Mrs. Fenton's face tightened. She was not accustomed to being spoken to that way. Certainly not by an abandoned wife who wore flour sack dresses and smelled like grass and sweat. "You know what people are saying about you." "I expect they're saying I've been abandoned by my husband, that I have no prospects, and that I'll be dead or gone by spring. Is that about right?" "Close enough." Clara finally looked up at her. "Then I'll see you in the spring, Mrs. Fenton. We can discuss my prospects then. Stay with me, because the way she finished that hay banking is the reason she was still alive to have that conversation." The work took 6 weeks in total. Clara cut grass from dawn until her arms shook, then bundled and stacked until dark. She built a framework of scrap lumber around the soddy to hold the bales in place, leaning them against the walls at an angle so rain and snow would run off instead of soaking through. She left gaps for the window and the door, covering the window gap with a removable panel of hay she could take down during the day and replace at night. The final result was a soddy wrapped in 3 feet of compacted prairie grass on all sides, the hay rising to the level of the roof, the whole structure looking less like a house than like a grassy hill that someone had stuck a stovepipe into. It was, objectively, ugly. It looked like the home of someone who had given up on civilization entirely. But when Clara put her hand on the interior wall of the soddy after the banking was complete, she felt the difference. The wall that had been cold to the touch, that had radiated the chill of the earth even on mild days, was now merely cool. The hay was working as August had promised, trapping a layer of still air between the weather and the walls, creating insulation where there had been none. She tested it further as October turned to November. On a night when the temperature dropped to 15 degrees, she let her fire burn down to coals and measured how long the interior stayed warm. 6 hours. The hay-wrapped walls held the heat like a closed fist, releasing it slowly through the night instead of letting it bleed away into the frozen ground. She calculated her fuel consumption for the first time. Without the hay banking, August had told her, she would need to burn continuously, perhaps 8 to 10 hours of fire each day, consuming wood at a rate she couldn't sustain without a horse to haul it. With the banking, she needed only 4 to 5 hours of fire, half the fuel, twice the chance of making it through to spring. The school children's blizzard came on January 12th, 1888. It began as a warm morning, unusually warm for mid-January, the temperature climbing to nearly 40 degrees. Children walked to school without coats. Farmers went out to tend livestock in their shirt sleeves. The sky was clear and blue, the kind of winter day that makes people forget what season it is. Then the temperature dropped 60 degrees in less than 12 hours. The cold front came down from the northwest like a white wall, visible on the horizon as a rolling cloud of ice crystals that swallowed the sun and turned day to twilight. The temperature fell from 40 above to 20 below in the space of an afternoon. The wind rose to 60 miles an hour, driving snow so thick that people couldn't see their hands in front of their faces. Children died that day. Teachers died. Farmers died within sight of their barns, unable to find their way through the white blindness. The official death toll was 235, but the real number was higher. The bodies not found until spring when the snow melted and revealed what the blizzard had hidden. Clara was inside her hay-wrapped soddy when the storm hit. She had seen the cloud on the horizon and recognized it for what it was. August had described exactly this kind of storm, the fast-moving front that could kill in minutes. She had brought her cow into the narrow lean-to attached to the soddy, filled every container she had with water, and pulled the hay panel across her window before the wind arrived. The storm raged for 18 hours. Clara sat in her soddy and listened to the wind screaming around the hay banking, trying to find a way in. The temperature outside dropped to 37 below zero with the wind chill, cold enough to freeze exposed flesh in under a minute. But inside the hay-wrapped walls, with her small stove burning steadily, the temperature stayed at 42 degrees. 42 degrees. Not warm, but survivable. Not comfortable, but alive. She kept the fire going through the night, feeding it small pieces of wood, nursing the coals, keeping just enough heat in the room to prevent the water bucket from freezing solid. The cow in the lean-to added its body heat to the structure, another source of warmth that radiated through the shared wall. The hay banking did the rest, holding what heat there was inside the little space, refusing to let the killing cold reach the walls. By morning, the storm had passed. Clara pushed open her door. She had to dig through a 4-foot drift that had piled against it, and stepped out into a world transformed. The snow was waist-deep in places, sculpted by the wind into hard-packed drifts that could hold a person's weight. The sky was clear and piercingly blue, the sun bright on the white expanse, the temperature still 15 below, but rising. She checked her cow, alive. She checked her chickens in their hay-insulated coop, alive. She checked herself, fingers and toes and ears and nose, all present, all functional, no frostbite. She had survived the worst blizzard in Nebraska history, wrapped in hay like a gift no one wanted to receive. The Fenton Ranch lost 14 head of cattle that night, frozen where they stood in the open pasture. They lost one ranch hand, a young man named Peter, who had tried to make it from the bunkhouse to the barn and never arrived. They found his body in the spring, 100 yards from the barn door, facing the wrong direction, killed by the white blindness and the cold. Mrs. Fenton did not come to visit Clara that winter. She did not come in the spring either, or the following summer. It was August of 1889 before they spoke again at the general store in town, and by then the story of the hay-wrapped soddy had spread across the county. Mrs. Voss, Mrs. Fenton said, her voice carefully neutral. I understand you had an eventful winter. Clara was buying salt and coffee, luxuries she could finally afford now that she had sold her spring butter and eggs at good prices. I survived it, if that's what you mean. How did you manage? That storm killed grown men with proper houses. I wrapped my house in hay, Mrs. Fenton, 3 feet thick on all sides. Dead air doesn't conduct heat. A house that can't lose its warmth can't get cold. Mrs. Fenton was quiet for a moment, something shifting behind her eyes. My husband has been thinking about building a new bunkhouse for the hands, something that would hold heat better in the winter. Has he? He was wondering if you might be willing to consult on the insulation, for a fee, of course. Clara looked at the woman who had called her home ugly, who had predicted her death, who had made it clear that an abandoned wife had no place in decent society. She thought about saying no. She thought about the satisfaction of watching the Fentons struggle through another winter, the way they had struggled through the last one. But spite, she had learned, didn't keep anyone warm. And money was money, regardless of whose hands it came from. I charge $2 a day plus meals, she said, and I'll need to see the site before I give you an estimate. The Fenton bunkhouse was completed that fall, wrapped in hay banking, just like Clara's sadi, the walls lined with compressed grass that would hold heat through the coldest nights. It wasn't beautiful, but it worked. The ranch hands who slept there that winter reported that they used half the firewood they had burned the year before, and they never woke up to frozen water buckets. Word spread. By 1890, Clara had consulted on hay banking for a dozen structures in the county. She didn't get rich, but she got something better: a reputation. The abandoned wife who had been expected to die became the woman who knew how to survive. The hay-wrapped sadi that had been a joke became a model that others copied. She married again in 1892, a widower named Thomas Riley, who had lost his first wife to childbed fever and needed someone to help raise his 3 children. He had seen Clara at the general store and asked August Lindqvist about her, and August had told him the story of the hay banking, the blizzard, the 42 degrees when the world outside was killing people. A woman who can keep a house warm through that, August had said, is a woman worth marrying. Thomas had agreed. They built a proper house together, frame construction with double walls and a cavity between them that they filled with hay. It wasn't a sadi wrapped in grass. It was a real house with real rooms and a real future. But the principle was the same: dead air, insulation, keeping the warmth where it belonged. Clara lived in that house until 1931, when she died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 62. Thomas had preceded her by 8 years, and her children, his 3 plus the 2 they had together, had all grown and moved on to lives of their own. But the house remained, and the hay banking remained, and the memory of what she had survived remained longest of all. The original sadi collapsed in 1915, the earthen walls finally giving way to decades of weather and neglect. But by then, Clara had long since stopped needing it. The ugly little house wrapped in hay had served its purpose. It had kept her alive long enough to become someone the prairie couldn't kill. August Lindqvist died in 1894, having lived long enough to see his advice save more lives than anyone could count. Clara spoke at his funeral, the only public speech she ever gave, and she told the story of the day he had come to her door and asked if she was staying. "He taught me that survival isn't about being strong," she said. "It's about being smart. It's about looking at what you have and figuring out what it can do. I had hay. I had walls. He showed me how to make them into something that the winter couldn't take from me." Mrs. Fenton outlived both of them, dying in 1901 at the age of 73. She and Clara were never friends, but they stopped being enemies after the bunkhouse consultation. There was a grudging respect between them, the kind that develops when people who dislike each other are forced to admit that they were wrong. At Mrs. Fenton's funeral, Clara left a single bale of hay on the grave. No one asked why. The people who knew didn't need to ask, and the people who didn't know wouldn't have understood. The Nebraska State Historical Society has a photograph of Clara's hay-banked sadi, taken in November 1888 before the Great Blizzard. The little house looks exactly as ridiculous as Mrs. Fenton had described: a lumpy mound of brown grass with a stovepipe sticking out of the top, like a prairie dog burrow enlarged to human scale. There is no beauty in it, no elegance, no hint of the civilization that Clara had been raised to value. But there is something else visible in the photograph, something that only becomes clear when you know the story. There is survival. There is ingenuity. There is a young woman who refused to die, who wrapped her home in the only material she had, who trusted the physics of dead air over the aesthetics of her neighbor's opinions. The caption on the photograph reads, "Hay-banked sod house, Cherry County, Nebraska, circa 1888. It doesn't mention that the woman who lived there survived one of the deadliest blizzards in American history. It doesn't mention that her ugly pile of hay saved her life while proper houses failed. It doesn't mention that she went on to teach half the county how to insulate their buildings, or that she died respected and comfortable in a house she helped design. Some things don't fit in captions. Some stories are too big for a few words beneath a photograph. But the people who were there remembered, and they told their children, and their children told theirs. Some stories end with the protagonist conquering their enemies. This one ends with something simpler. A woman who stacked hay around her cabin every fall because she knew what winter could do, and who lived long enough to see everyone stop laughing. If this story of ugly survival resonated with you, consider subscribing for more narratives of forgotten wisdom. What is the hay in your own life that could save you if you stopped caring what it looked like?